happened, and so there's like an internalization of what happened, or sometimes making it your fault, even though I had nothing to do with you. And so it's learning how to do, like, so there's often, I sometimes will do parts work with people if it
Yeah,
comes up in the session, because
great.
it's learning how to really just honor and care for the part of you that's hurt, and so
Mhm,
when that voice comes up,
mhm,
it's not trying to like fight it as much as connecting with the part of the hurt part that actually is producing those thoughts,
mm,
and
yeah,
offering a more open heart to them, because that softening can, lead to the voices not being as loud or insistent. I mean, about, but it's like
mm,
our paradigm of how we walk through life literally can sometimes be like a wall, of not letting
mm,
certain things in. And so
right.
getting to kind of like do work that helps to like release that can just really just open up. And so then maybe someone comes in knowing exactly what they want to do, but it's not really what they want to do, and
Mm,
then they come to this place of like, I've always assumed I was this, and it's like
mm,
they're
mhm,
not, and there's a freedom, but then there's going to be some time of unknown,
mm,
but it's like,
yeah,
to me it's
yeah.
like that's a gift, that's a gift.
All right, great. Welcome everybody to another episode of Define Your Purpose. And purpose is the birthplace of ideas. And I am really excited today to be joined by an intuitive and mindfulness coach who offers her clients a ton of clarity and support. And she is well versed in social impact and consciousness. And I really want to welcome Claire Chantal Olivier to the show. Thanks so much for taking the time, Claire. I really
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Carl. Thanks, I'm really happy to be here.
So, I like to ask people kind of how they got into their current line of work, and um, what started you into coaching.
Hmm. Well, it's it's definitely been a long journey, and I think for me there's always been these like threads that have there's been like a thread at a time. So when I was
Mhm.
younger, I'd say in my 18, 19 or something, I started exploring meditation and mindfulness. And so that's kind of
Cool.
been something that's been a big foundation for my life for the past 25 years.
Mm,
And then later I was exploring kind of anything to do with our internal world, like what impacts our well-being, where do we go to when we are suffering, and how do we increase our joy in a way that's really honoring our authenticity and not skipping over anything. And so regardless of what I've been doing work wise, that's always been a focus for me personally, and it's something I always like pursued, whether it's meditation retreats or exploring different energy work. And so for many years, I was living in San Francisco. And when I was there, I had kind of gotten to this point where I had explored therapy and different somatic therapies, and they were all really helpful. And then I got to this point where I was like, I want to be able to explore more of my internal world and to help myself when things feel out of whack. And so I came across this school that focuses, it's a clairvoyant training school. And and it was a very grounded place. It's surprisingly, it's one of those where you could maybe have different images of what that would be, especially in San Francisco. But it was just very grounded, and people learning how to work with their own energy, and learning over time how to read other people's energy. And so I did that. It was about a 2-year program. And then fast forward again to becoming a meditation mindfulness teacher. and then putting kind of all these different pieces I had together to kind of start
Wow,
working with people.
that's awesome. So, I mean, you studied at UC Berkeley, I guess. You had a master's in social work. It sounds like you were studying mindfulness before people started talking about what it was.
Yeah, it definitely was. Well, especially it started in, I think it was like my senior year of high school. So it was definitely kind
Mm,
of before I heard of it in other places. But yeah, there always was this desire to also connect with people. And so that's where my energy towards social work came through. And
mhm,
so, yeah, I got my master's there. And it was kind of coinciding with when I was doing the clairvoyant program. So I was like, finished the
mm.
master's, and I was like, oh, I can't take on another school right now, but I'm really interested in the work. And so I would just, take different classes at the time. But there also came this point where I realized that I didn't want to make decisions from my mind. And that was like a
Mm,
big turning point for me because, again, I think how people make decisions is a really big one, because it's like you're
yeah.
making them all the time, whether they're what do I eat to what do I do with my free time to, what do I do with my life. So it's like how we make
Mhm,
decisions is a pretty big deal. And so for me,
yeah.
once I started kind of really having that come up for me is like, how do I make decisions? That
Mm,
kind of also just brought like honed in some of my internal focus, which eventually led to then impacting how I would work with people too.
mm. So was comfort zone kind of a consideration in that? And getting, I that's something people have a lot of problems with a lot of times is getting out of that into the to be able to grow, right?
Right. That's very fair. I definitely feel like that's something that comes up a lot with people. And I will say, like, I feel like that's one thing I've consistently been able to do is kind of have the courage to go outside my comfort zone. It's like everyone has issues, so it's like I've got my own issues, but I feel like having the courage it still feels uncomfortable, but there's still a part of me that's like I still want to. There's something in me that wants to move in this direction, and I really want to
Mm,
listen to that, and I'm gonna honor that more than the fear that's coming up around taking that step.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So is that something that you've helped your clients do?
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think a big part of working with people too is I mean, clairvoyance stands for like clear seeing, so it's kind of like
Mm,
looking at what's really there. And I think sometimes my work with people is learning how to be honest with themselves around
mhm,
what they're actually feeling, because we're a lot of people can be really cut off from their feelings because they're uncomfortable, or it's
mhm,
like they don't really want to if they recognize that feeling, then they may have to do something about it, kind of thing. And so, kind of having a really caring, open space with people as they navigate that and like helping them navigate that really, for me, is one of the foundations when I'm working with someone because people come in and it can be for like something like I'm feeling stressed, I don't know what to do kind of thing, or it can be like I don't like this part of my life externally.
mhm,
But for me, there's always an internal piece. And so creating a space where people can explore that and kind of open up to maybe some of the more challenging things that they haven't wanted to face, because at the same time there's also like a liberation that's possible, because alongside of painful emotions that people maybe have pushed down, there's also like their deeper desires that maybe have also been pushed down because they
right.
maybe haven't fit a certain mold,
Mm,
or and for them to actually like honor that can also feel like such a relief.
right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like we're taught to not feel emotions a lot of times and to push things down, and that I think ends up being damaging in the end, that
Yeah.
just that very act of repression makes you end up not feeling and having problems with your feelings.
Yeah, because then everything you do then tries to orient to continue to push down those feelings. So it's just like continuing to build a building on an unstable foundation. and it's like,
Mhm.
well, oh,
Mhm.
now it's starting to wobble over here, so I have to compensate and throw more weight over here, but it's not like real. It's not the real person. So I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
the other thing is like,
Yeah.
yes, they're like, what you may have to um, come to terms with is facing some of these painful like emotions to be living from a more authentic place,
Mhm.
and at the same time, like, to actually feel like ease in your body and know you're being true to yourself is such a gift. And then it's like, then you can build anything on top of that and not
Mm.
have to just spend your time worrying about not having something fall, because you've
Mhm.
already created this like solid foundation, and that's what you're like feeding.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah, it's I think a matter of confidence too, that having confidence in yourself, and knowing that you'll make the right decisions regardless of what happens.
And sometimes I think it's like confidence can definitely be built from kind of taking the risk before having that. It just takes, that's why I feel it kind of like courage is even before confidence. Because confidence, I
Mm.
feel like there can be this feeling of like, I know this is gonna work out for me. I know I'm something. And then courage is kind of like, I'm just gonna go into the unknown because I feel drawn to do so and I don't know what's on the other side.
Mm.
And so I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes taking those risks. So like, for example, like when I had my last like official social work job, um, I it was a dream of mine to have this kind of social work job, and I loved it. But after a year, I just felt so it's like something was not working for me. Like, and I mentally
Mm.
tried to like work through like what it was. Like, it's like, do I need to have a less of a commute? Do I, like, what I tried to be very mind based around it, but I just kept feeling it's like I'm not meant to keep working here. But I had so many, I had feelings of like guilt and fear and doubt. And like,
Mm.
what would I do after this? This is what I got my master's for. This is like my dream job. Like, where does one go if you leave your dream job, um, like voluntarily? And
Mm.
so I actually went back and did a reading with one of my teachers at the clairvoyance school. And once we could kind of like look what was beneath the like fear and the doubt and just like unknowingness, then it was just so, it was like, oh, it's so clear you're not meant to stay at this job. And like my
Mm.
body felt, it just like almost like collapsed in relief, because
Mm.
it's like it just
Mhm.
knew. But it's like I couldn't have a mental understanding of it. I couldn't give my mind a good reason for it, and I couldn't tell it, well, this is what we're going to do next. So it's like I didn't have confidence. I guess it's like I had confidence in myself, but not the sense of like, oh, I know I'll find a better job next. It's like I didn't have that kind
Mm.
of, I mean, I knew I was a competent person and I was intelligent, but it wasn't that. But it was, if confidence was involved, it was just a confidence in my own inner wisdom that something is telling me to leave this job, and that's what I'm
Mhm.
trusting and going with.
Right.
And then I think confidence can come sometimes later if you don't have it
Mm.
to start with.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be hard to let go of negative voices too from your past. I think
Yeah.
that people will have those voices echoing in their head, even though they know the thing is not true or it doesn't apply to them. That they'll still have that in their head, that someone said it to them, and it
Yeah.
still sticks with them.
Yeah. And it's also just like a grace in knowing. I think just also one of the things when I work with people is just, everyone's coming with their own unique flavor of whatever, but it's like it's like, it's so human. It's so human that
Mm.
people are going to be struggling with inner critic voices.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think the other piece is that a lot of times if people are taught anything about them, it's like almost like fighting them.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
what I
Mhm.
found is that kind of opening up your heart space and just giving care to the part of you that's really hurt, because those voices are coming from somewhere. It's coming from
Yeah.
whatever experience, but it's really coming from this place of hurt, of or maybe not knowing, if you were younger, like what to do about something that happened. And so
Mhm.
there's like an internalization of what happened, or sometimes making it your fault, even though it had nothing to do with you. And
Mhm.
so it's learning how to do, like, so there's often, I sometimes will do parts work with people if it
Yeah.
comes up in the session, because
Great.
it's learning how to really just honor and care for the part of you that's hurt. And so
Mhm.
when that voice comes up,
Mhm.
it's not trying to like fight it as much as connecting with the part of the hurt part that actually is producing those thoughts,
Mm.
and offering
Yeah.
a more open heart to them, because that softening can lead to the voices not being as loud or insistent. I mean, it's definitely made a huge impact on my life with those voices. And I know for a
Mm.
lot of people I've worked with too, just this softening and like opening your heart to your experience versus that same kind of mentality of just like painful emotion, push it away.
Mhm.
Because it
Right.
doesn't, you can't actually do that. I mean, it's the illusion of I pushed it away, but you just push it down, you just put something over it, but it's not gone.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of meditation. When people say that they can't silence the voices in their head or whatever, and they can't be silent long enough to meditate. And
I'm like, me neither.
I think that's a common thing. But you're
Totally.
you're also not accepting that part of you that doesn't want to be quiet.
Yeah.
If you're trying to stifle that and not have that, then it's the same sort of thing that you're trying to repress it.
Right. It's still just like a fight. I mean, yeah, I feel like that's like one of the most common things when, people will say like, I can't meditate because I can't stop my mind from thinking. And it's
Yeah,
like, join the club. Like, I can't either.
yeah,
Like but
yeah.
it's like that's not the point. It's like,
Mhm,
I
mhm,
think so that's what I think is
yeah,
a really common misconception around meditation is
mhm,
as if we're supposed to sit there and literally be blank, and have nothing arise. And it's not about
right,
that. It's how you respond to what comes up,
mm,
and it's that
mhm,
how part which
mhm,
is so important and has the potential to have such a big impact. It's like it's learning
yeah,
how you relate to yourself, like how do you relate to your
right,
thoughts, how do you relate to your emotions, and especially
mhm,
if you're doing like a formal meditation like sitting, it's just noticing these thoughts as they arise, and then just being able to label them as thoughts, and also realize like you are not your thoughts. And that's
right,
another thing,
right,
especially for people
yeah,
who have never touched into meditation, is that we really think that this thought we're thinking like is who we are.
mhm,
It's like there's the thought and us, and they're like glued together, but they are two separate things. And so even just kind of introducing that to people as they start exploring meditation is just like, oh wait, this like painful thought I'm having, it's painful, but it also doesn't have to be like my identity. It doesn't have to be who I
mhm,
am,
right,
and there's such a
yeah,
freedom just in that, to let it know like this is just
mhm,
something that's moving. This is like clouds across the sky. Like it's as much as
mhm,
you can kind of let, it's like acknowledge they're there. It's not about pretending that you're not having the thought, but it's about not engaging with it, not getting hooked by it, and
yeah,
kind of coming back to your breath or whatever your touch point is, to kind of be like, okay, that's just out there. I'm going to just stay connected to my breath. I'm going to stay in my present moment.
right. Yeah, there's so much power in an identity too, I think, that when people take on an identity like I am sick,
Hmm.
as opposed to saying I have a sickness.
Yeah.
They're very, very different.
Yeah. Yeah, we put it, or even just, it's like even like saying I am depressed, and it's like you're feeling
Mhm,
depressed in that moment, but
mhm,
sometimes if we're saying I am sad, people over time can take that as in like I'm just a sad person,
right,
and it's
right,
like, well, no,
right,
it's an experience that you're having, just
mhm,
like everyone experiences sadness. Everyone to some degree experiences depression at some point in their life. like everyone
Sure.
can feel
Yeah.
anger or rage or just
Mhm.
jealousy or greed or any of these things that we would label as like negative. It's so human to have them arise, and not one
Mhm.
of us is only that thing, you
Mhm.
know.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's important to say, why am I feeling this, and where is it coming from, and allow it to be felt, I think.
Yeah, I think that's like the other big piece is that people will sometimes say to me like, "I've been feeling my anger," and it's not going away.
Mm.
But what often more likely is happening is that they're repeating the story that's making them angry. So
Yeah.
there's a way that a lot of times people will just be spinning in the story that's feeding their anger and thinking
Mhm.
that's the same as feeling their anger.
Yeah.
And it's really different, and it makes all
Right.
the difference in the world, because if you just feed that story, you will continue to stay angry and it is painful,
Mhm.
but if
Mhm.
you're able instead to let go of the story and just focus on like, what am I feeling in my body? It's like, I'm so angry, like, and just drop it from being up here into like in your body. And it's not about, people, it doesn't mean by doing that it's like, oh, I feel it in my heart or my stomach. I mean, maybe you might, but sometimes I don't necessarily feel like one space in my body, but sometimes
Mhm.
it just feels like this pulsing energy that's like moving through my system, and I just really surrender to it, and just let that move. And that's really a big piece of just actually, because the emotion is meant to move, it's wanting to move, it's not wanting to stay stuck and
Yeah.
lodged in anyone's body.
Yeah.
And it's our resistance to the emotion that actually causes the most pain.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Um, so maybe you could talk a little bit more about your work with clients. Um, I mean, do you help people with um, making big changes in their life? I know that can be really tough lots of times.
Yeah, it's really widespread in terms of what I've helped people work
Hmm.
with. I
Okay.
mean, it could be like sometimes someone could come in and be like, I don't know what's going on in my life. And it's like, okay, we'll start there, because it's
Hmm.
like that's
Mhm.
obviously huge, but then slowly kind of like fine tuning, like, well, where's the actual pain piece, or where's the part that you're actually suffering around, or what part is actually, because it's almost like someone could just say, oh, I'm angry about whatever, but it's like very broad, and it's like kind of like, well, what, like kind of coming in slowly to see like, well, where's the actual place where someone's getting stuck, or
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, it can be around exploring like self-care, managing stress or like other painful emotions, how they communicate, their relationships, like healing past hurts. Like it really can depend, so if someone comes in and they're just like, I don't know what's going on in my life, then basically I kind of have two ways where I work, where I'm going to read their energy present time around what's happening, because we have a lot of wisdom within us. And a lot of times people are kind of cut off from that because they're in their heads, and they're filtering everything through their mind. And so it's almost like they could have an insight, but if it goes through their mind and their mind's like, that's not logical, that doesn't make sense, that's not going to
Hmm.
work with our paradigm of life, then they don't
Yeah.
actually hear it. They don't actually take it in.
Hmm.
So, on one hand, I'm reading their energy to help them access other parts of themselves. And then just kind of doing more in terms of me listening to my own intuition of like how to guide the session. So they're always interactive. And we kind of just, again, start with whatever someone's conscious with. I mean, about, so it's like, let's say it's like, like, I can't stand my mother. It can just be this one like statement. And it's like, okay, that's
Hmm.
where we start, And so I
Hmm.
kind of like open up the energy
Okay.
to see, because a lot of times people can come in with issue A, and they're like, well, I want to work on issue A. But then in working, it's like, well, actually, what's underneath A is C. So we're gonna look at
Mhm.
C, and so
Mhm.
that's why for
Yeah.
me it's very present moment based.
Mhm.
Like I encourage people to kind of I do drop in sessions. So for those people, like a lot of those people are like, I've never done a session like this. I don't know what to, ask about or talk about with you. And in those cases, I'm just kind of checking with them of like, well, what's on top for you? Like, what have you been thinking about? Like, where does your mind go? And that just
Mhm.
gives us like a little entry point for people who I kind of, you know, are booking the session like ahead. Then it's like giving them a chance to think for themselves, like, well, what do I want to explore? Like, where maybe am I feeling stuck? Or um, and starting with like one or two things of those, and then I don't want to see them before, because then I'll just get in my mind about it. So it's better for me of how I work is just
Mm,
in that moment they'll share with me whatever the thing
okay.
is, and again, that's just like the
Mhm.
starting point, and then
Awesome.
it's just kind of an opening to where it goes from there, because it's like there's a wisdom that wants to come through. It's like everyone, there's always something that wants to come through. We know for
Mhm.
people,
Right.
it may not be what they're
Mhm.
expecting, but
Mhm.
there's always an aspect of it that they can connect with. And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, I had thought of that yesterday, but I like almost like they push their own insight down, but then
Mm.
having someone else, having it come up from someone else, seeing that in them, just like reinforces like, oh no, that was real. I can pay attention to that.
Right. Hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you ever make plans for clients as far as what they want to achieve? Some coaches will come up with a 12-week plan or something like that to try to accomplish goals. And
Um, not in that form.
okay, yeah, yeah,
For me, and that's why I tend to use intuitive guide versus coach, because I do
yeah. Mm,
think sometimes
okay.
people can go into that mentality. And for me, just how I work, I mean, it could be like, okay, we're gonna like, work for 6 sessions once a week. So there can be like that kind of plan. But I feel like what ends up being more helpful with how I work with people is just seeing, like following the thread, because it's like we're staying
Mm,
connected to what's really alive within them, and letting
yeah.
what's coming through be the guide. So it's
Mm,
like, definitely getting clear on, we're going to touch on the things that they want to touch on, but to mentally go ahead and decide in week 3 we're going to do this. For
mhm,
how I'm working is, it just doesn't make as much sense, because it could be
mm,
like, oh
mm,
well, that's
mm,
actually going to come at week 6, unbeknownst to us, because these other
mhm.
things were actually more important, and it's so great that they came before, because that sets this up in this other way, like in ways that you
Yeah.
can. It's like I stay out of my mind as much as possible when I'm working with people. So it's connecting me with my own wisdom, and then them with theirs, because a lot of
Mm,
times people have already tried to think their way through whatever the thing is,
yeah.
and and it hasn't worked. And not that there isn't a place for strategy or a place for whatever, that it's like our mind is meant to be used, but often for me it's kind of given the driver's seat versus
Mm,
it's, for me, it's like not meant to be in the driver's seat, like it's meant
mhm.
to support ideas that come from our deeper wisdom, ones that really have our deepest care in mind.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. I I I like that. It's kind of like we always have these deeper ideas of what we should do or what we should be doing that kind of bubble up from underneath. And I I feel like that your subconscious always wants the best for you,
Yeah.
and it can be hard to listen to it sometimes because there's so much noise in the world.
Yeah. Well, and because what's interesting is that sometimes people come in and it's like they have this mental idea of what they want to work on, but as we're working together, it's like that's actually not
Mm,
their truth.
mm,
So in that case, it
yeah.
wouldn't even make sense for me to build this whole plan on that, because it's like, oh, we ended up getting to their truth of what's really important to them, like, on session 2 or 3, and that's totally
Mm,
switching what their
mm,
direction is. They're like, oh, wait, if I don't feel guilty about not doing this in my life, then the thing that I actually want to do can arise.
mm.
Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I find that sessions kind of
right.
go in their own rhythm, because
Mm.
it's like I'm committed to, authenticity and encouraging people to really open up to that. And once you release conditioning, you can be really surprised at what comes through, because
Mm.
we can,
Yeah.
even when I was doing social work, I feel like there was a way, there were certain things that I was like, well, I like social work, so I should like these other things. I should want to go to this conference.
Mm.
Like I would literally kind of, it's like, and I was kind of conscious of it happening, but not totally. And then like, but later being outside of it, it's just like, I actually didn't want to go, to those conferences. I didn't want to do that, but it was like I couldn't
Mm.
even connect with that part of me, because I had kind of decided I was going to be a social worker, and that as a social worker, I should like A, B, and C, So I feel like there's
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
can be so many layers within people of like what they actually feel and are drawn to. And if they've kind of put themselves connected with an identity of like, I'm a this, or I'm a this kind of person, then literally other things will not be able to enter, even if they're things they really
Yeah.
care about. But it's like
Mm.
our paradigm of how we walk through life literally can sometimes be like a wall, of not letting
Mm.
certain things in. And so
Right.
getting to kind of like do work that helps to like release that can just really just open up. And so then maybe someone comes in knowing exactly what they want to do, but it's not really what they want to do. And
Mm.
then they come to this place of like, I've always assumed I was this, and it's like
Mm.
they're
Mhm.
not, and there's a freedom, but then there's going to be some time of unknown,
Mm.
but it's like,
Yeah.
to me it's
Yeah.
like that's a gift, that's a gift to
Mhm.
connect more with what's really true for you,
Mm.
because once
Mhm.
you have that, then it's like, okay, you can really build a foundation that's going to feel good, and you're not doing it for anyone else. You're doing it really
Mm.
just for you and what resonates for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I love that. That's awesome.
Hmm.
So, what kind of packages do you have available for working with clients?
So at this moment, I've been less focused on packages. So I kind of have been doing, and I may
Okay.
rethink this,
Mhm.
but and people can say kind of from the get go, I want to do a certain amount of times, but there is
Mhm.
also, I think, because of knowing that things can shift for people, it's more of like checking in with them during the session of like, okay, yes, I do want to kind of keep exploring this, so let's book the
Mm.
next 5 sessions or something like that. um, and some people do like one session a month kind of thing, so it really,
Mhm.
it's
Okay.
I'm more focused on tailoring it to each person.
Mm.
um,
Nice.
and for some people it works to just do once a month or once a week, or some people know that they want to like, okay, I'm going to do 5 sessions so I can dive deeper into whatever this thing is, and then we'll re-examine it. So yeah, for now that's kind of more how I've been doing it.
Okay. Great. That sounds
Yeah.
good. So, people can find you on LinkedIn. I know you're on there,
Yeah, I'm
and
on LinkedIn. I have a website. It's my full name, clairechantalolivier.com, and
yeah,
people can reach out to me through that as well. I'm also on Instagram, so I'd say any of those.
nice, great,
Yeah.
great. Did Was there anything else you wanted to get to today? Maybe any other thoughts that you wanted to bring up for our talk?
No, I feel like I think we touched on a lot. I mean, I think
Yeah,
ultimately
yeah,
it's for people to know that, kind of whatever they're going through, even if it feels fully external, it's like this relationship, this person, this job, this
mm,
anything, there can be information to be gained around that. And there's always going to be an internal piece that wants to be looked at too, and that's a place where I think ultimately people can find more empowerment, because there's
mm,
sometimes, it's we can't change our external situations in this exact moment, but especially if we're
right.
suffering some with something, there's always an internal piece that can be explored or honored or examined, to offer more more wisdom, in how you approach something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
great, awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
My
Really,
pleasure.
really
This is
enjoyed our
great.
talk. Yeah, definitely. We'll have to have another catch up sometime soon and see how you're doing.
Yeah, I'd love that.
um, well, I like to say when we walk with purpose, we glide with destiny.
Hmm. I like that. I like that.
Thanks again for being my guest, Claire.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was great talking with you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Me too.
Just just stay on for a